Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Office Bloke Aidan.
I'm Gaynor.
I'm Sophie.
Today we've got the Oklahoma City bombing, America's other terrorist attack. Not as quite as famous, this one.
No, I remember it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a few years after 9/11, and also I think it was around 2 years after the Waco.
Yeah,
The Waco
this
siege.
happened kind of.
This was about 1990.
It was just a 1 year after on the same date, wasn't it?
It was.
I feel like they said that in the Waco one.
I thought
this
it was 2
happened.
years after.
Might have been 1 or 2 years, but
It
it
was
was on the same date.
1995.
And did this happen because of Waco, or was it just?
I just remember he was an ex-soldier and he had a proper beef with the government. And,
Right.
And it was a homemade bomb. I think it was made from like some sort of fertilizer. And he hired a truck and drove to a building in Oklahoma and then set it and got on it into another car and drove off.
Right, yeah, anyway, let's give it a look.
In 1995, 168 men, women and children were brutally murdered by a truck bomb that took out a third of a federal building in Oklahoma City. Suspicion initially fell on international terror organizations, but the public would soon be shocked to learn that according to the FBI, the catastrophic blow was primarily orchestrated by just one man, an ex-army sergeant called Timothy McVeigh, and he was already in custody. The horrifying event still stands as the deadliest domestic terror attack in US history. There was nothing particularly terrifying about Timothy McVeigh in his younger days. His unimpressive physique earned him the nickname Noodle McVeigh, and he received regular beatings and swirlies from his peers. In his mid-teens, he became captivated by guns, fearful of nuclear attack and communist takeover, and spent most of his time developing his survival skills. In his yearbook, under future plans, he wrote, "Take it as it comes, buy a Lamborghini, California girls." After leaving school, he joined the military and was promoted to sergeant and earned a Bronze Star for his efforts in the Persian Gulf. So, why then, on the 19th of April, 1995, at the age of just 27, did he drive a truck filled with 5,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate soaked in fuel oil to the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City? In 1991, he requested an honorable discharge from the army, believing he lacked the right stuff, and he returned to civilian life. He struggled with depression, suicidal thoughts, growing anger towards the US government, particularly on the issues of taxes and gun control, and began consuming anti-government literature. Bill Clinton was running for president with a campaign that pushed for gun control. McVeigh felt any attempt to remove civilian weapons was an attack on his freedoms and rights. In February 1992, he wrote a letter to the Lockport Union Sun that included the line, "America is in decline. Do we have to shed blood to reform the current system?" A red flag that hopefully wouldn't be missed today, but back then it was. Hatred and distrust turned to radicalization following two events. The first was the Ruby Ridge incident in August 1992. Federal agents had been attempting to arrest fugitive Randy Weaver, who'd been due in court for illegally modifying weapons for white nationalist groups. The arrest went horribly wrong and resulted in the tragic deaths of a federal agent, Weaver's teenage son, and heartbreakingly, Weaver's wife, as she held her 10-month-old baby in her arms. However, it wasn't until 1993 that McVeigh's
We got him mixed up, didn't we?
Yeah, it's not Waco, is it? It was the Ruby
Ridge, yeah,
siege?
not Waco, Ruby Ridge siege.
Yeah, sorry.
Got confused there, didn't we?
Yeah,
we did
The
for a
two
bit.
together. People were probably shouting at the screen before we were talking
like,
about it.
"Oh,
Like,
it's
we've got it
not
all wrong,
Waco."
we've got it all wrong.
Radicalization was cemented. It began when the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, or ATF, attempted to execute a search warrant and gain access to the heavily armed Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas. The group resisted, resulting in a 51-day siege that ended on the 19th of...
Maybe it's just both.
Yeah, he's obviously involved in
So it's both events that
have wound him
have
up
wound him up and
and made him do what he's done.
that makes
That
sense.
yeah, because when it said Ruby Ridge, I was like, I thought I did remember it from Waco,
Yeah,
and maybe
same.
I've just got it mixed up, but obviously not, yeah.
Right.
So we were right.
of April when a fire broke out. 76 members, including men, women, and 25 children, were shot or burned to death. During the siege, McVeigh travelled to Waco to sell pro-gun rights bumper stickers and literature. On witnessing the acts of the federal agents firsthand, he became convinced that the government was taking away people's guns for control, not protection, and more than that, they deserved to face the same pain that they were dealing out to their own citizens. In the year that followed, McVeigh's anger grew fierce. He started selling ATF hats with bullet holes, flare guns he claimed could shoot down an ATF helicopter, and he began experimenting with homemade pipe bombs under the guidance of his former roommate, Terry Nichols. If he believed the results of McVeigh's trial, it was at this point that a plan started to form in his mind. In his words, it moved from the propaganda phase to the action phase. Initially, he considered targeted assassinations against those responsible for Ruby Ridge and Waco, but ultimately he settled on a single strike against a government building, ideally one used by at least 2 of the 3 most hated agencies, the ATF, the FBI, and the DEA. It also needed to be large enough to cause a significant number of deaths, as that would make his message more powerful. He settled on the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, as it housed the DEA, ATF, and recruiting officers for the Army and Marine Corps. He also believed that the open space around the building would provide great photo op for use in propaganda. McVeigh didn't build the bomb alone. He worked with Nichols, the man who taught him how to make pipe bombs. Together they spent nearly a year buying or stealing the materials they needed, including 5,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer and 1,200 pounds of liquid nitromethane. There were several missed opportunities to prevent the bombing during this time. McVeigh raised a number of red flags when he attempted to buy the nitromethane and hydrazine at various NHRA drag racing events. The mixture of the two would be incredibly explosive, and his demeanor and lack of a competitor's license meant he was turned down multiple times but never reported. Eventually, though, he found a supplier who was willing to sell to him. McVeigh also tried to recruit his ex-roommate and best friend Michael Fortier to take part in the attack. Fortier...
Surely if you're selling that to him, you've got to ask him like what you're using it for and stuff like that, for like legal reasons.
That's what I mean, like unless you have like a business selling it or using it.
Probably need to show proof of what you're going to be using it for.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
That's what I would have thought would have happened.
Sense.
It's terrible how easy it is to get hold of stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully nowadays, like, you
can't even get a blooming Red Bull here without being...
ID'd for it.
Yeah.
Or, like, fireworks or something. It's like, you know...
Yeah.
Refused, but McVeigh still confided his plans and showed a diagram of the bomb to Fortier's wife, Laurie. She even made a fake driver's license for him, which he used to rent a 1993 Ford F700 truck from a rider on the 14th of April 1995. Then he and Nichols constructed the bomb in Geary Lake State Park using bathroom scales and a plastic bucket to weigh and mix the chemicals. They filled 13 barrels with the explosive mixture, which weighed 7,000 pounds in total. Then they installed a dual-fuse ignition system with a time delay that would give him time to escape, and hooked it up to 350 pounds of Tovex Blastrite gel sausages, which would, in turn, set off the barrels. The whole thing cost $5,000 and was assembled with duct tape, fish tank tubing, and components stolen from a quarry. On the 16th of April, McVeigh parked what would be his getaway car, a fairly conspicuous yellow 1997 Mercury Marquis, several blocks away from the Murrah building. He removed the license plate and left a sign that read, "Not abandoned, please do not tow, will move by the 23rd of April, needs battery and cable." On the 19th of April, he returned, this time in the rented rider truck loaded with the bomb. He wore a t-shirt that read Sic Semper Tyrannis, which means thus always to tyrants. The words claimed to have been said by both Brutus at the assassination of Julius Caesar and John Wilkes Booth after the assassination of Lincoln. He also carried an envelope full of propaganda and a bumper sticker that read, "When the government fears the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny." He added his own note, "Maybe now there will be liberty." As he neared the Murrah, he lit the timed fuses and parked the truck in a drop-off zone that was tragically located under the building's daycare center. He locked it, dumped the keys a few blocks away, and made it to his getaway car. At 9:02 a.m., the bomb detonated. The resulting fireball had a diameter of 70 feet and a temperature of 1,093 degrees Celsius or 2,000 Fahrenheit. It gouged an enormous 30-foot wide and 8-foot deep chunk out of the building, exposing the surviving floors like the side of a dollhouse. Although McVeigh had arranged the barrels to deliver a shaped charge in an attempt to focus the blast on the Murrah, 324 other buildings were damaged. Glass shattered in 258 of them, and the broken glass alone accounted for 5% of the deaths. The explosion could be heard 55 miles away and registered a 3 on the Richter scale. To those in the building, the blast was too loud to hear. One minute they were working, the next they were opening their eyes to smoke and darkness, meters away from where they'd been sat. Some were killed immediately by the blast as the floor collapsed beneath them and they fell to their deaths. One survivor, Florence Rogers, recalls how she was sitting at her desk in an office she shared with 8 others. The blast threw her backward onto the floor. When she looked up, her co-workers had vanished. She called out to them, but the space where they'd been was just now an open pit. The narrow ledge where Florence sat was all that was left of their office floor. Others died from smoke inhalation or horrific crush injuries. Diana Bradley was found trapped under a cement pillar that now bore the weight of the building above it. Rescuers couldn't lift it without causing the remains of the mirror to collapse on top of them. Dr. Andy Tuggle, a surgeon who attended the scene, realized that the only way to save her was to crawl into the small hole where she was trapped and amputate her leg. The space was so tight that he had to be pulled in and out by a colleague, and his amputation knife wouldn't fit. Instead, he had to use disposable scalpels, but they blunted quickly. When he'd used his last, the job still wasn't done. He pulled out his pocket knife and...
I can't lie, I'd rather die. I'd rather just
someone
cut up my leg.
Yeah.
I just don't think I
She wouldn't have had any anaesthesia or anything, would she? There.
No, they would. Yeah.
The
The immense pain that they must have been in.
That's what I mean. You'd rather at that point. I'm sure she's grateful now, years later, but at the time you'd be like, no, it's not worth it, is it?
Yeah.
Used it to sever the last tendon. A total of 159 people were injured, and a staggering 167 people were killed, including 19 children. McVeigh fled the scene and made it out of Oklahoma City in his yellow car with no license plate. Unsurprisingly, he was pulled over 90 minutes later by highway patrolman Charlie Hanger and arrested for having a concealed weapon. After booking McVeigh into jail, Hanger searched the patrol car. He found a business card that McVeigh had hidden. It was for a military surplus store, and on the back was scribbled a note: TNT at $5 a stick, need more. Meanwhile, the Vinon, the rental truck, had led investigators to the Ryder Rental Agency, where the owner was able to create a sketch of McVeigh. They also tracked the truck to the motel where McVeigh had stayed and discovered it signed in under his real name. That's when they realized that the perpetrator of the deadliest domestic terror attack in US history was already in custody. So after McVeigh's court hearing on the gun charges, federal agents took over and started questioning him about the bombing. They didn't need to work too hard to get Terry Nichols either. They wired McVeigh's dad's house, and once they got his name and Nichols found out they were hunting him, he handed himself in. In preparation for McVeigh's trial, 900 federal, state, and local law enforcement personnel conducted 28,000 interviews, amassed 3.2 tons of evidence, and collected nearly 1 billion pieces of information. With so much damning evidence, securing a conviction for McVeigh seemed like a sure thing. What hung in the balance was the death sentence. One of McVeigh's prosecutors, Scott Mandeloff, later explained, if you convicted him but did not get the death penalty, that would not be okay. And we could not lose this. It was like a pressure cooker. As the story came together, holes started to appear. Witness testimonies revealed he had not been alone on the morning of the bombing, that there'd been another Ryder truck at the motel, and other people had been seen entering his room. Plus, how had McVeigh and Nichols managed to construct such a devastating bomb with almost no training? Unfortunately, these others unknown couldn't be identified, and the risk was that they could cast doubt on McVeigh being the sole perpetrator, and therefore deserving of the death sentence. So, the trials went ahead with the question remaining: who else was involved? The prosecutors got their way, and on June 2nd, 1997, McVeigh was convicted on 15 counts of murder and conspiracy and sentenced to death by lethal injection. He was executed in June 2001, a sentence that had not been carried out by the federal government since 1963. Terry Nichols was tried twice, first for conspiring to build a weapon of mass destruction and 8 counts of manslaughter of federal officers, for which he received a life sentence. Then the state of Oklahoma sought the death penalty for 161 counts of first-degree murder for the civilians and 1 fetus who'd been killed in the blast. The jury found him guilty on all counts, but couldn't agree that he deserved death. In the end, he was sentenced to 161 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Michael and Laurie Fortier were also tried, but as they'd agreed to testify against McVeigh, they received a ridiculous amount of leniency. Laurie was granted immunity for her testimony, and Michael only received 12 years in prison. He was released into witness protection in 2006. This was despite the fact that they both watched as McVeigh planned mass murder and even demonstrated it to them using soup cans. Fortier's lawyer, Mike McGuire, felt it appropriate to state that his client owes nobody and was excited about his future. They'd had 9 months to raise the alarm, but did nothing. The bombing received a worldwide outpouring of grief, and over $40 million was donated to the city and the families affected. This included $18 million, which was placed in a trust for the college funds of the 219 children who lost a parent that day. Rescuers and those affected joked that they had to be very careful about mentioning anything they needed, as the generosity was often overwhelming. One dog handler explained how he'd been chatting to a local and that casually asked about what type of food his dog liked. A little while later, his command post informed him that 40 bags of it had been dropped off. Another firefighter described how he'd casually mentioned he'd brought work boots and had no sneakers when he was off shift. A few hours later, someone showed up with bags of new sneakers in multiple sizes, looking for the firefighter who needed shoes. Despite the incredible resilience and strength of the community, the wound was deep. People were traumatized, and the media flooded the local news with graphic and unedited footage of the horrors of the attack. A photo of one child, Bailey Alman, who was carried from the rubble via firefight, became the image that represented the event. The photographer, Giles Porter, even won a Pulitzer for it. Tragically, Bailey died later in the hospital, and her mother spent months re-traumatized every time she glanced at the TV or walked past a newsstand. She was given no control over the photos used and later said it was very hard to go to stores because they are in the checkout aisle. It was always there. It was devastating. Everybody had seen my daughter dead, and that's all she became to them. She was a symbol. Many families also found it difficult to find closure, as they believed, along with many others, including McVeigh's prosecution, that he didn't act alone. Prosecutor Larry McKay famously admitted, "If you had said to us, anybody in the room 100% confident that McVeigh was alone, raise your hand, we would have all kept our hands in our laps." Evan McVeigh's presiding judge made a public plea to the FBI for them to keep investigating. Of course, any doubts left in a case this infamous leave room for conspiracy theories. One particularly grisly investigation centered around a left leg. It was initially discovered without an owner and later identified as belonging to Lakeisha Levy, a member of the Air Force who'd already been buried. They reopened her coffin as, horrifically, it turned out she'd been given the left leg of someone else. As she'd already been embalmed, no DNA could be extracted, and so the limb couldn't be matched to any one of the 8 other victims buried without one. The most likely explanation is that it belonged to one of them, but others suggest it belonged to a second perpetrator who was caught in the blast. McVeigh denied it had help and relished his role as a lone perpetrator. He responded to doubts by saying, "You can't handle the truth, because the truth is, I blew up the Murrah building, and isn't it kind of scary that one man could wreak this kind of hell?" Not all the accomplice theories are as far-fetched as the leg one, though. In fact, most point to McVeigh being used as a foot soldier for a larger group. For example, in 1994, the ATF received a warning from an informant that white separatists in the private community of Loam City were planning to plant a bomb in a federal building. Unfortunately, eager to avoid another Waco, the ATF pulled her out and failed to inform the FBI. John McGraw, the ATF director in 1995, later admitted that he believed if the informant had been kept on, the bombing could have been prevented. The FBI weren't completely out of the loop, though. In 1994, they'd received a tip that propagandist Louis Beam had been spreading the word that something big would happen on the 19th of April. He said, "They've got some kid who's going to do something." The FBI never followed it up. There's also McVeigh's choice of getaway car. Would someone with the capacity to pull off such a horrendous attack really have planned to make his escape in a bright yellow car filled with anti-government literature and no plates? Or is it more likely the car was supposed to be left as a calling card, and McVeigh was meant to be evacuated by an accomplice instead? The truth is, we'll probably never know, and Oklahoma was soon overshadowed by 9/11, and fear of terrorism turned outwards once again.
First of all, he's obviously a complete lunatic and wants people to believe he's done it himself.
Yeah.
And secondly, why is somebody put into witness protection when they come out of prison? What? That's what I don't understand. Like, just put them back in. I don't get that,
because they know if they put them back in society and people know who they are, that people would kill them.
Yeah,
literally.
So let them back into society, and you've done it. Now deal with it.
Like, you made your bed, now lie in it.
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
Of thing, yeah?
It really annoys me when people are put in witness protection. It infuriates me. Like,
that's what I mean. Like, they're not the victim in that situation, were they? You know, they've murdered 161 people, was it? Including children.
Yeah.
Like, what did they ever do?
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
I think they should all be killed with lethal injection.
If you've got beef against the government,
that's what I mean.
It doesn't really make sense to just kill.
Yeah, innocent children in a nursery.
That's what I mean. There was a daycare in there. It wasn't like some big, like, wasn't like the Houses of Parliament or something, was it?
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. I mean, I know there was federal government in there, but there was a nursery there.
That's what I mean. Like, surely, like, I think even most, like, criminals, they draw the line at children, you know. If it's men, other men or, you know, politicians are like, it's free game, but when it's children,
exactly.
you don't do it.
No, I didn't actually realise he'd been killed. I thought he was still in jail. I didn't realise he'd been killed by injection. But I think they all should have been. It's just taxpayers' money that's going to waste, housing them for years and years and years. Just kill them all.
All right, Gaynor. Calm down.
Infuriating me, that.
Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.